Welcome back, my friends, to another video on our Portraits of Fame channel.
Long ago, and oh so far away, he's making a list, checking it twice.
Considered by many to be the best female voice in history, unfortunately, when she needed help the most, her own relatives turned their backs on her. Along with her brother, she achieved worldwide fame, but her love life was also a real struggle. She passed away in the prime of her youth under mysterious circumstances, but her musical legacy will live on forever. This is the story of the Carpenters brothers and the female member's great tragedy.
Those were such happy times, and not so long ago. How I wondered where they'd gone, but they're back again, just like why do stars fall down from the sky every time you walk by, just like me, they long to be.
But before we continue, I recommend you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss out on valuable information like this today, okay? Born March 2nd, 1950 in New Haven, Karen Ann Carpenter was one of the greatest voices in music history. Her brother, Richard, was born on the 4th of 1946. Her parents, Agnes and Renaud, were one of those couples who generally did not show affection, not even to each other, not even to their own children. Despite this, it was very clear that Richard was her mother's favorite, and she did nothing to hide that fact from Karen. The boy's father had a large record collection that spanned many genres including rock, pop, jazz, and even many classical music records. So Karen and Richard grew up with this influence that would be decisive in their lives. The young people's father loved music and, since they were little, he insisted that his children take classes and that they learn to play some instruments. Richard showed great skill and sensitivity for this art from the age of 3. His first instrument was the accordion, but he later switched to the piano. Karen, on the other hand, loved listening to old records, but an ability to play instruments or sing would only develop in her teens. Where Richard went, his sister always followed. They were very close, although they also had their fights, something from childhood, which perhaps explains many things that they would experience in adult life. Karen was very fond of baseball and used to play with her friends in the neighborhood. When the players were chosen for each team, Karen was always chosen first than Richard, as she was very good at baseball, and this often annoyed her brother. Sometimes when this happened, her mother Agnes would even scold Karen for making Richard sad. Wow, you don't need to be Freud to guess the consequences of these attitudes in the poor girl's life. By the time Richard was 16, he had become an excellent pianist. His parents were convinced that a great career as a professional singer awaited him, and, to help him make it, in 1963 the family moved to Southern California, where much of the country's music industry was concentrated. Karen didn't want to move and lose her friends, but her parents wanted Richard to be famous, and they were determined to. As a curiosity, Richard innovated in the music of the chapters by including a fast guitar solo, something unusual for the time. This song is considered by many to be the forerunner of the ballad genre, and was included on the duo's 4th album, entitled A Song for You, released on June 22, 1972. Other successful songs, such as It's Going to Take Some Time, number 12 on the chart, and Top of the World, number 11 on August 1, 1972, helped cement the Carpenters' fame.
You know, all of this began for us, I guess, about a year ago with a release of a record called Close to You. And from that time, we have had the best year that anybody could ever ask for. But there's always been one thing that's been kind of hard for us to explain, and that's exactly how much it means to two kids from Downey, California, to share our music with audiences from all over the world. But what I can say is that you've made tonight very special for us, and I only hope that we've done the same for you. Thank you very, very much.
invited to the White House and meeting with President Richard Nixon. Behind the scenes, the duo's life was tumultuous. Richard started taking Metacolum sleeping pills and eventually became addicted to the drug. Karen, on the other hand, developed anorexia nervosa and started taking laxatives and hiding food to avoid eating. Even with these problems, the brothers continued to work and release successes, such as the song Yesterday Once More, which became a hit and is considered one of the most acclaimed of their career. The sixth album, entitled Horizon, brought another great success. The song Rumors About Karen's Thinness sparked concerns and speculation that she had cancer, but in fact she was suffering from anorexia nervosa and becoming addicted to Pecca, a substance used to induce vomiting in cases of overdose. From 1975, the success of the brothers began to decline, and sales of the seventh album, entitled A Kind of Hush and released on June 11, 1976, were not as expressive as those of the previous albums. Despite personal problems, the Carpenters sold 150 million records worldwide and are remembered as one of the biggest names in world music, with Karen's voice being considered one of the best and sweetest of all time. If you liked her a lot too, type, "I'm a fan of Karen Carpenter." Leave a comment about the band and what is your favorite song by them. Where are you watching? In 1979, Richard confronted his addictions and checked himself into a specialized medical center. Karen took advantage of this break from her brother to work on a solo album that she had been planning for a long time. She recorded sweet songs that deviated from the Carpenters' traditional style, with disco tendencies and other fast rhythms that also demanded much more from her voice. Karen loved the result, but when she presented it to her brother, he took it rather coldly. In meetings with the label's directors, everyone decided to shelve the work, a fact that plunged Karen into a deep depression. Apparently, she could only sing what Richard and the managers wanted her to sing. Even renowned producer Quincy Jones begged management to release the album because it would be a huge hit, but to no avail. The truth is that Richard was very jealous of Karen for having achieved success without his company. Therefore, Karen's solo album was unfortunately only released in 1996. 13 of the time, such as Tony Danza, Steve Martin, and Alan, but despite having commented in several interviews that she did not believe that a marriage could sustain her pace of work and sightseeing. She even confessed to her friend Olivia Newton-John that she yearned to have children, a family, and a happy home, like any normal person. Unfortunately for her, that dream never came true. In the mid-1980s, Karen met a realtor named Thomas James, who proposed to her. Karen thought this was the perfect opportunity to have the house she always wanted and the children she always dreamed of. However, just days before the wedding, Thomas confessed that he couldn't have children because he had a vasectomy. Once again, Karen's dreams came crashing down. She wanted to call off the wedding, but her mother stopped her, saying it was too late. Against her will, Karen married a terrible man who would be her worst nightmare. Before long, Thomas was spending all of Karen's money, lavishing thousands of dollars on whims and luxuries. But the worst thing is that not satisfied with that, he subjected his wife to great mental and physical humiliation and torture. Karen's life was hell, and just a year after they got married, she filed for divorce.
The hardest thing I've ever done is keep believing there's someone in this crazy world for me.
Karen's closest friends were worried about her, but didn't know how to help her. Her parents insisted that she was fine and that her excessive dieting was a family matter that should not be publicly discussed and could be resolved as a family. In 1981, Karen, against her parents' advice, accepted professional help and traveled to New York to undergo treatment with a psychotherapist named Stephen Levin, who had written a book about eating disorders. After a few months of therapy, he called Karen's parents, Richard and Agnes, into a family session and explained that Karen was in very bad shape. As part of their treatment to get better, the doctor asked them to tell Karen that they loved her. Richard, her father, easily told her, but her mother, Agnes, refused to do so and even scolded the doctor for calling her on her first name.
What's it been, 9? It's a long time.
10. We met in Annabelle's in London.
In London, we met in London before I even came over here.
Oh, Annabelle's.
Yeah. Ah, yes, Annabelle.
Oh, yes. Are you close? Are you see each other all the time, or are you so busy that...
Well, as often as we can. I mean, our schedules are kind of... I have lunch tomorrow and then I get a call 11. I can't make it for lunch. Okay, how about Friday? So Friday I'll call, I can't make it, and it goes on like that, and eventually
Our
managed to see
services know each other very well.
Your services. But you were just on a boating trip together, weren't you?
Yeah, well, in the last, since you got, now don't giggle, since you got back and since I got back, we were actually here together for a couple of months, so we finally, we'd planned a boating trip to Catalina, because since I got married, which is a year ago yesterday.
Right.
1982 was a very difficult year for Karen. She was sad, emotionally exhausted, and her body was reaching the point of no return. In the middle of that year, she was found by an employee sleeping on the floor, and they couldn't wake her up. There was fear about what had happened to her life, but they managed to revive her. A few months after that incident, on February 4th, 1983, alerted by a heavy blow, Karen's mother, Agnes, entered her daughter's room and found her lying on the floor, dead.
Talking to myself and feeling old. Sometimes I'd like to quit. Nothing ever seems to fit. Hanging around, nothing to do but frown. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down. When I was young, I'd listen to the radio, waiting for my favorite songs. When they played, I'd sing along. It made me smile. Those were such happy times, and not so long ago, how I'd wondered where they'd gone. But they're back again, just like a long-lost friend. All the songs I love so well.
She was just 32 years old. Karen was addicted to Pecca syrup, a medicine that caused vomiting in cases of poisoning. But what she didn't know is that consuming it in large doses had a terrible side effect, as it slowly dissolves the heart muscles. In the end, it was this organ that no longer resisted and triggered what was already inevitable. In 1989, 6 years after Karen Carpenter's death, a film was made in an attempt to tell the singer's true story. However, Richard and Agnes refused to film several scenes that showed Karen's desperate desire for her mother's affection, as well as other cuts that showed the family's inner problem. Another film was Todd Haynes' 1989 Superstar, The Karen Carpenter Story. Starred by dolls, Karen is a Barbie. It offers a critical look at the family and the environment. Brother Richard is a selfish exploiter of Karen and his mother's favorite son. Thus, Karen, sick and vulnerable, ends up being subjected to a frivolous and cruel industry, concerned above all with her figure and weight. This film could hardly be seen because Richard Carpenter sued the director, who did not own the rights to reproduce the songs. The justice ordered the destruction of the copies, and in 1990 it went out of circulation. End of story. In 2010, a book reconstructed the tragedy of Karen, Sad Little Girl, The Life of Karen Carpenter, by Randy L. Schmidt, a compensatory and kinder vision than the film that showed Karen surrounded by a cruel family and a voracious media. There were several other books like Why Karen Carpenter Matters, audiobook by Karen Tong Ian, and Karen Carpenter's Confusion by Jonathan Harvey. 100 million records and 20 #1 hits weren't enough to assuage her feeling of not being good enough for her mother and not looking good enough. So the scenes had to be deleted and rewritten. In the final scene of this film, which depicts the last day of Karen's life, the character of Agnes looks affectionately at her daughter for the last time from the stairs and says, "Karen, I love you." The young woman smiles and replies, "I love you too, Mom. Good night." Unfortunately, this final conversation on the eve of Karen's death ended up being created by the managers to have a dramatic effect on the public. Unfortunately, in the real life of the young singer, she never heard those long-awaited words from her mother's mouth. Varies the story of the talented, if hapless, Karen Carpenter. What do you think of Karen? Participate, submit, and leave your comment below this video. On Karen's tombstone is written "A star on earth, a star in the sky." Well, if you found it interesting and liked the information, then take a few seconds to share it with your friends and family. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell to receive the latest news of our content. A big hug. Until the next video, bye bye.